Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, yesterday was a little bit satirical. It was a little bit of parody when I said that the WNBA should go ahead and sign this Julie, Tatar, this biological man playing overseas. Of course, the best thing for them to do, and I'm not going to talk about this today, I just wanted to, look, we constantly have new listeners and people that don't necessarily understand my sense of humor on a short clip on social media or whatever. And I just want to make sure that you in this audience understand that the best thing to do is for the WNBA to come out and actually say, listen, we are a women's basketball league. All of this nonsense about men playing in our sport is not going to happen. We understand that there is a biological difference. It's a women's league. That's that. Deal with it, people on the left. That's what should happen. I get it. My point was, if they're going to virtue signal and posture about this, if they were going to pontificate and act confused about gender and all this sort of stuff and pretend that there are no differences and that women are the same as men and all this sort of stuff. I'm saying if you're going to do that, then simply do it. Sign this guy. Let the league implode, and all the people who are reasonable, who understand those differences can, of course, move on to greener pastures where hopefully someone with a brain and an understanding of science and basic nature would understand those things. So welcome to today's program. We're not going to talk about that today, my friends. Instead, I want to talk about an article of something that I came across yesterday that illustrates some of the deep problems that exist in our culture, in our families today. More people are cutting family members out of their lives over a lot of reasons, but the top reason is, of course, political. And I want to talk about this today. It doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. I want to talk about that today and welcome you to be part of the conversation as well. If you want to share your thoughts and opinions, Todd at toddhuffshow.com is where you can send your email, or the best way is to send me a text, 317-785-1030. I read those texts. I respond to those texts. It's funny, sometimes I respond to those texts and people don't think that it's me. I can't do that with all of them, but certainly I do that, my friends, and I welcome you to share your thoughts, opinions, feedback. Always be sure to incorporate the appropriate amounts of adoration of praise for yours truly. I'm kidding, but just a little, my friends. Let me ask you a question real quick. If you're concerned about your high cholesterol, your high bad cholesterol, is it better to take a couple of soft gels a day or to spend hours in your doctor's office talking about it? Listen, I like my doctor. Don't tell him I said that. Listens to this program. I get messages from him from time to time, but I don't want to spend a lot of time in his office. I'm not saying, listen, this is not a statement to say that that is never necessary. Please don't misunderstand. But if that's the choice, I'm taking the soft gels. That's why I take Solti. It's an all-natural, clinically proven dietary supplement that lowers cholesterol. There's no prescriptions. There are no doctor's visits. It's not even a drug. Just take 2 soft gels a day. That's all it takes to take care of your heart's health. Solti.com is the website, SOLTEA, Solti.com. Promo code Todd is going to save you 50% off your first 3-month supply and get you free shipping to boot. Solti.com, SOLTEA, promo code Todd. All right. So yesterday, look, there's a lot of things vying for our attention. This is always the case we talk about these things on a regular basis. Politics, the things at the intersection of politics, faith, and culture. There's never a slow day, so to speak. In fact, I've shared this with you before when I first started this program, which by the way, our birthday is coming up. The show's birthday will happen next week, our 11th birthday. For those who are tuning in for the first time, who may hate me because I'm a conservative, welcome. I want you to be here. You can hate me. You can sling your arrows at me. It really doesn't bother me. My objective is to help people hear and receive truth, and I welcome you in this audience. I'm not going to be like the left. In fact, I've been looking for the left's version of conservative, not bitter, so radically insane left and not bitter. I can't find it. I can't find even the remotest thing out there that slightly resembles conservative, not bitter. And that's because of, again, what motivates them and what the basis of their worldview and ideology is. But I welcome you to this audience if you have a differing opinion than me. In fact, that's the only way we're going to ultimately win, regain control of America, make America America again. I mean, there are people out there that are promoting things that's truly communist. There are communists in our midst that are emboldened. In some cases, they have candidates. Some cases, I mean, look at New York City with Zoran Mamdani. Don't tell me that some of those things are not absolutely communist that this guy is seeking to do in New York City. In fact, I just saw a clip. I thought about playing it today. Someone in, I think, Minnesota maybe, a masked person comes and speaks at some, I don't know if it was a town hall meeting or what it was, calling for the abolition of private property. This is out there. This is a real thing. The only way we're going to win this battle for liberty, for freedom, for the Constitution, for the American people, is if we figure out how to persuade at least some of the people who are on the wrong side of this argument right now. And you're not going to do that by excluding them and getting your feelings hurt because they say nasty things about you at first. It makes no difference. You're welcome to do that. I do not care. I do not care at all. So, but welcome you to this audience. But I know as I started this program nearly 11 years ago, which we'll talk probably more about next week, but in a nutshell, I remember one of the things that I was concerned about, having not ever done this sort of thing exactly before. I thought, how am I going to talk for an hour, maybe longer, each and every day if there's a slow news day? That, of course, has not materialized at all. Back in 2015, when I first launched this podcast, which now is a radio show that's on a couple dozen or around that radio stations around the country. It's a podcast and so forth as well that, of course, you can listen to and lots of places. But I didn't know how to navigate that. I was learning. I had studied this for a while. I talked about these things in my younger days as well, talked about these ideas. I've studied this stuff, but stayed on top of the news, was a very sincere listener and learner of Rush Limbaugh. But nonetheless, I didn't know how are we going to have, to be able to talk about things every day for a long period of time. What happens if it's a slow news day? That's not been the case. In fact, we've headed the other direction. It's become such a perpetual, whatever the antithesis of a slow news day. So we've been drinking from a water hose for the past 10 plus years with all of the information, all the stories, all the things that are happening, all the spying on the Trump campaign, all the Russian collusion delusion, all the Dr. Fauci stuff with COVID, all of the fill in the blank, right? All of the communists that are now running, the so-called democratic socialists, which of course are kissing cousins of the communists. All these things have developed over time. And along with that has come a wide rift between people personally. And this has impacted even families. And this is a terrible thing. This is absolutely terrible. Before I get into this, and I'll read you the headline here so you know where we're going. And by the way, if you want to read this, you can Google this. This is a Fox News article. But if you want to read the things that we talk about on this program, the easiest way to do that is to join the Inner Circle. It is absolutely free. You'll get an email each evening with some additional thoughts from me, additional content, and you'll get links to the stack of stuff. That's a hat tip to the late, great Rush Limbaugh. But you'll get links to these things. And all you have to do to sign up is just text the word JOIN to 317-785-1030. but also you can go to Fox News or search for this article. But the headline here: 5 reasons more Americans are cutting off their own parents, according to psychologists. Amid Aaron Rodgers' family estrangement, expert shares key drivers of growing no contact trend. Written by Melissa Ruddy of Fox at foxnews.com. It published just yesterday. So that's where I want to talk about. But I want to tell you really quickly that I'm a conservative Christian, but that's not. I was raised in a Union Democrat home. I was raised by a father and a mother who, especially my father, was a Democrat. He's a Union Democrat, but he loved his country. We were taught a lot of values that are absolutely part of what I believe today. But I didn't grow up in church or anything like that. And I have a wonderful relationship with my parents today. It doesn't have to be something that breaks families apart. In fact, listen, one of my driving force for me on this program is to help people hear and receive truth. That's what we try to do. And I say, listen, I want to be clear, it's not as though I've got it all figured out. That's not what I want to communicate, though I like to add for the impact here. I can certainly understand why you think that we do, but I don't, by the way. I really don't. But when we do find things that are true, we better hang on to those things for dear life. We better make sure that we take the time and effort to make sure that does not get lost in the shuffle, that's not confused, that we don't mix things up, and that gets passed on to the next generation. When something is true, we had better hang on to it for dear life and make sure that we articulate it and communicate it. And we candidly had fallen asleep at the wheel in this country for a long time because of our prosperity, because of our relative comfort, because this country is so great and there are so many wonderful things that we became apathetic. Now, you may not have personally. I'm saying as a culture, as a whole, that is absolutely the case. And so we deviated from those things over time. In fact, my father-in-law, who passed away a couple of years ago, I remember having this discussion with him when he retired, or shortly after he retired. My father-in-law was a single father, and he raised his kids, and he helped to send them to college and that sort of stuff. Was working, was coaching sports, was very involved in their lives, a very good father and a great father-in-law as well. But when he retired, I think he realized, my oh my, all these things that had been happening in my country, in my government, I wasn't aware of them because I was so focused on whatever else it was, as he was raising a family as a single dad. And that was an eye-opener to him. This is not the America that I was taught about in school back as I was growing up, my father-in-law would say. So a lot of people have that eye-opening experience, especially as they get older, because a lot of things have happened to push us from what this country is supposed to be. Not necessarily, look, the system is great. The system that we have in this country, what was framed by our founders, does not need to be altered and radically changed as the Democratic Socialists of America want to do. They want to abolish the Senate, and they want to abolish the presidency and all this sort of stuff. We don't need to do that. We just need to hold the folks accountable so that they're not abusing their power, so that we don't have Dr. Fauci-type people, bureaucrats in our government. This is why stories and headlines of, for example, another headline out today is talking about how much money the Trump administration has saved through cutting fraud. Was it $200 and some billion that Vance announced they have saved in government expenses identified since March? $200 and some billion, which is no small figure. There's lots of this stuff happening, and we've been asleep at the wheel collectively. Again, you may not have been, but a lot of people have been. And so now that we've awakened to this, we see what's going on. We see people telling us that they are public servants when in reality what they're doing is trying to personally enrich themselves, personally empower themselves, And there's some really bad stuff going on out there. There's some really bad things that are happening in industries that are colluding, you could say, with the federal government. And that stuff, people are trying to clean some of this stuff up. Some of the people are trying to protect it and make sure that it doesn't change. But there are some people in the administration that are trying to clean these things up. The financial fraud, the waste, the abuse, things like RFK Jr. trying to clean up the food industry, the food that we have in this country today. There's the medical industry, right? How we were treated and how the tyrants took advantage of us during the COVID crisis and all of this sort of stuff. There's lots of things vying for our attention. And it's such an emotional journey for folks. And you have young people who are, in many cases, they are, of course, if they go to public schools or if they go to universities around the country being taught by leftist lunatics, they are being pushed to the left. And some of them see their families as the problem, the people who are traditional American values, folks like me and you. And the truth is, people who have these values, they're more likely statistically, not the case. I mean, listen, I've always loved these values. I was that kid in school when you were telling me about America. I took it all in. I loved it. I've loved this place. And again, part of it was how I was raised, even though I was raised in a Union Democrat home. I love this place. I'm thankful for this place. We have it better than 99% of the people that have ever walked this planet. And I am grateful for that. I have no guilt over that. I want other people to be able to experience what we have. And I'll tell you this, they don't get to experience America in other places if we start adopting their ideas instead of making sure that they see the brilliance and the benefit of our ideas. And I don't even call them our ideas, the things that have been revealed to us, the things that we have been that we have learned over time. That matters tremendously. That's why we need people in this country leading this country who believe in the American ideas so that they can export these ideas. You want to solve some of the world's problems. You want to, one of the biggest, when we talked about illegal immigration, I've always understood why people want to come here. I don't understand, if you look at America through the lens of the radical left, why anybody would want to come to the country that they say we live in. Nobody would want to come to that country because that's not the country that we live in. They are jaded. They are messed up in their interpretations of what America is. We need people in this country that love it, who understand it, and who say, listen, we want to make other countries see how beneficial these policies and liberty and free markets can be for them. And so we want to export those ideas, right? We can't take everybody into this country of America. What we can do, though, is we can teach people around the world, show them the ideas that we have embraced and why they have worked, and encourage them to do the same. And when their markets begin to improve, when their standard of living begins to improve as well around the world, people will no longer need to flee in massive numbers or feel the need to do so to come across our borders. The places around the world will be in a better position as well. But we don't have that. We have American haters inside the system, American haters who think their number one job is to stop Trump from basically returning us to these ideas and to our foundational roots and cutting out the corruption and the fraud and all that sort of stuff. And so all these discussions about this and these competing ideas and so forth, they come to a head inside the family. So let's read a bit of this article here. Again, the headline, 5 reasons more Americans are cutting off their own parents, according to a psychologist. Cutting off family members is becoming more and more common, leading experts, I hate that phrase, but nonetheless, experts to consider the drivers of division. This is not directed at the so-called expert in this article, but man, how many times have you seen a headline after something didn't go the way the experts told us it would go? Headline is some version of experts wrong. That's a very common headline. But nonetheless, there's experts here talking about why family members are cutting off other members of their family. NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers' years-long estrangement from members of his family, which reportedly ended recently after a reconciliation with his parents. He alluded to this in the comments we played of his earlier, by the way, this week on this program when he was on the Pat McAfee show. But the article says here that has renewed public interest in why some relatives become permanently divided. A 2025 YouGov survey found that 38% of U.S. adults are estranged from at least one family member, including siblings, parents, children, or grandparents. Based on his research and work in the field of family estrangement, Dr. Richard Blake, a British psychologist and author based in Austin, Texas, shared the following 5 factors that he believes commonly contribute to fractured family relationships. Listen, I'm getting to the end of this segment. Let me say this really quickly. I know that this affects a lot of people. I mean, this is 38%. 38% of U.S. adults are estranged from at least one family member. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm specifically talking, and we're going to talk about the political reasons or the reasons about values that people use to separate. Listen, I'm not here. I know that there are difficult situations, and I want you to hear me say this. You may be in a situation of estrangement. I know people who are in very difficult situations where they are estranged from a family member. And these things can get messy and complicated. I'm not here to stir that up or to make it anything sound like it's your fault or anything. That's not the point. The point here is to talk about how bad it is to allow politics and values to tear apart our families. So that's what we're going to talk about here, my friends. I'm going to take a timeout in a minute. Before I do that, though, there's a lot of confusion out there about kratom. You've probably heard or read the headlines. Most of those are based on synthetic junk that isn't real kratom at all. Real kratom is natural, it's tested, it's handled with care. That's exactly what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. Every batch is lab tested for purity. There's no chemicals, no fillers, no shortcuts. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations, and it is a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that's as long as a CVS receipt. So you can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Coupon code Todd Huff gets you 10% off your first purchase. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time out for me if you're watching on a social media feed. I'm going to have to start a new one. If you're listening on radio or podcast, sit tight, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking here about estrangement in families, in personal family relationships. 38% of Americans, according to a YouGov survey that was conducted last year, 38% of U.S. adults are estranged from at least one family member. And again, as I was saying before the break, listen, I know that there's a lot of factors, and I don't pretend to know your circumstance. I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm talking specifically, we're going to talk about this psychologist, Dr. Richard Blake. His number one on his list of reasons for estrangement from family members is political and values differences. That's what I want to talk about here today. It doesn't have to be this way, my friends. And you might be in this situation, and it may not be your fault. It may not be your fault. I didn't always understand this when I was younger. But sometimes, look, it's you know the old saying that if there's conflict, it's never 100%, right? 100% somebody's fault. But I got to tell you, there are instances where if someone's decided to just lose their mind and act irrationally, and if they've, I guess, consumed some of this radical content, it may be close to that, my friends. So this is not to point blame or to say that there's also nothing that we can't do as individuals as well. There might be something we can do, but there are cases where there's literally nothing you can do. And I didn't always understand that. I didn't, if for example, as a kid, if I saw people divorced, I thought, well, both people wanted that. And, as you get older, you realize sometimes that's not it. For example, in a marriage relationship, it's easy to say it's a 50-50 proposition, but that's really not it. It's got to be 100-100, right? It's got to be both people being completely committed, because if one person is 100% committed and the other is 0% committed, it doesn't matter how much the 100% commitment is. That's not going to work. Regardless here, number one list on his list, this doctor's list of reasons that people are estranged from family members, political and value differences. Here's what the article has to say. Long-standing study of more than 2,000 mother-adult-child relationships found that, quote, value dissimilarity, end quote, was a strong predictor of estrangement, suggesting that differing beliefs may play a large role in family rifts. That could be political values. That could be gender ideology, Blake told Fox News Digital. There were people more likely to cut off someone for having a different opinion than for people who have done serious violent crimes, he said. So certainly, political differences are a big problem. It doesn't have to be this way. But let's set the stage here for what happens. And there are teachers out there who believe it is their job, and that's not all teachers. There's some wonderful teachers out there in our public education system. I had some great teachers. I had some teachers that weren't very good. I think we all can relate to that. I didn't have woke teachers, at least in high school. I had some radicals in college. But the teachers that we have out there are certainly some, especially in this increasingly political climate, they believe, I know that this may sound hard to believe for a lot of people, because this is not maybe how it was for you growing up, but there are people who are now public education teachers or administrators, I'm not just picking on the teachers, who believe they've been led by radicals. Think about where they go. They go to these colleges that are run by leftists. They've sat through and listened to the insanity that's defended on college campuses. They may, if they're a young teacher, they've probably lived through a world where the campuses were segregated. There were spaces for different types of students based upon race or whatever. They had to listen to some insanely leftist woke teacher talk about all sorts of things, including gender ideology. They're told by the teachers, by the professors, who are undoubtedly left-leaning at best and not, if not radically insane leftists, tell them that biological boys can become girls and biological girls can become boys and all this stuff, right? The 58 genders that you can pick or whatever on social media, whatever it is. They've been fed this line of garbage, and they've lived in these environments. A lot of these professors think it is their job, especially for kids, for young people coming into college. They believe it is their job to redefine their values. Make no mistake about this, my friends. I'm telling you, I experienced this 25, 30 years ago. There are people who believe, especially if a student comes from a Christian background, a conservative home, and even though I came from a Union Democrat home, I would say it was a conservative home. We loved America. We flew the flag. I truly grew up in the kind of a Leave It to Beaver setting, if you remember that old television show. Dad worked, mom stayed home. She was a homeroom mom. She was active. Dad coached sports. I mean, I grew up in kind of the 1980s America, right? That was, it was a wonderful thing. I didn't always understand it. I didn't recognize it at the time, but the older I get, the more grateful I truly am for that stuff. But regardless, if you go to college, or when you go to college, especially if you're going to be a teacher, you have to, right? You got to go get your degree to prove with a piece of paper that, hey, I can do this. I can teach kids. I had no ability to do this prior to being taught this by some leftist professor. And statistically, professors are overwhelmingly at least liberal, typically radically left, oftentimes anyway. and they believe it's their job to reprogram you. And sometimes this happens. That's where you see some kids who are raised in church, believe in biblical values, believe in traditional American values. They go off to school for a semester. They come back. They look radically different. Sometimes they, if they're young ladies, they have a girlfriend. If they're young men, they have just the whole thing, just totally upside down from who they left as. Now they come back. That's what a lot of these professors believe their job is to undermine those values. And then when you factor in that they're teaching people that are going to be then teaching the next generation, right? Now you see the power. Now that's multiplied. You're not just changing the values of a person who's going to go work a job where they're not going to have influence over lots of people in the next generation. Now you're teaching people who are going to be directly impacting hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of students over the course of their careers. And so now you've got a situation where you have you've seen these videos, right? You've seen these TikToks of teachers who have come into the classroom who have basically admitted that they're telling the students, though sometimes they film themselves telling the students about, I'm not Mr. or Mrs. this, I'm Z or Zer or whatever nonsense we're dealing with. I'm not a girl, or they're clearly biologically male. They're telling their students to call me Ms., and the kids have all sorts of questions. Some of these people believe that this is a good thing. This is absolutely a lie straight from the pits of hell. This is detrimental to society. It is confusing to young people, and it's destroying lives, my friends. But it's not just the trans movement, it's also politically, right? They're in there. Again, listen, we're starting, maybe you could say, an experiment here. We've homeschooled our family. Our oldest is going to be graduating soon. But we've homeschooled our kids from the beginning, and we've just worked with our local school. They graciously changed policy to adhere to the IHSAA guidelines that would allow homeschooled students who participate in one class a day on campus to participate in middle school and high school sports. And so we're taking advantage of that, and we're feeling that out. In fact, school starts here next week. There's some, we're all figuring this out. The school system is, we are, the kids are. And so I'm not here to have a blanket, I'm not here to just say a bunch of bad things, but to pretend that there are no people in the public school system who are teaching kids these things, who believe it is their job to make them little leftists or to challenge conservative principles and values, to challenge biblical beliefs in these young people. That is insanely naive, my friends. Some people believe that. And so that contributes to the tensions that are in the home and some of these estrangements. I've got to take a break. I'm getting to the end of this segment, my friends. Here's a quick question for you. Do you know where your money goes after you spend it? That answer makes you cringe, or if you just genuinely don't know, maybe it's time to check out Freedom Marketplace. This is a platform that we built to connect conservatives like you with businesses that share your values, businesses that refuse to support leftist candidates, leftist causes. It is free for you to use. It's all about keeping your dollars aligned with your principles. freedommarketplace.net is the website. Check it out today. freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. Time out for me. You're listening here to Conservative, Not Better Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. It's sad when politics and values can cause not just disagreements within a family, but a tremendous rift to where there is actual estrangement. And that has happened. It's one of the reasons that 38% of American adults, according to this article and research and so forth, that 38% of American adults are estranged from at least one family member. That may have impacted your family as well. I think I'd rather, in the time we have remaining, spend time talking about maybe some tips on how to deal with that instead of analyzing that at the moment. I think that that's more practical. That's where we're going to end up here today, my friends. But before I do that, ever wish you had a whole team to help manage your financial life? That's the beauty of family office services of Full Suite Wealth. Their experienced advisors bring together everything from high-level investment management, private equity, private credit, options, strategies, along with complex legal needs, all customized for you. It's like having a family office just for you with people who know your story, know your goals, and if you're serious about planning for the long haul, check them out today. Jason and his team will take great care of you. FullSuiteWealth.com is the website. Again, FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. So what do you do if you find out, well, if you find yourself in a situation where you are estranged from someone in your family, and that's not your choice, right? There's a rift. Maybe there's a kid that's gone off to college. I don't know. That seems to me to be the most common one. They go off to college. Some professor tells them about how terrible the patriarchy is, the system of government, how they've been trying to keep the 1%ers try to keep the 99%ers down, and all this sort of stuff, right? They've been fed this garbage. They've joined radical groups. They start hanging out with people who are Marxists and call themselves democratic socialists, whatever. These are people who do not share the same values that you raised your child to have. And they come home and if they come home at all, they tell you that you've contributed to the problem. They don't want to talk with you. They think that you're evil for voting for Trump, whatever. Let's say you find yourself in this situation. What can you do? And acknowledging sometimes that there's nothing that you can do. That's certainly the case. I mean, sometimes there's just nothing that you can do. I would say if you're a believer, you can certainly pray. And that's where you should start, to pray for that, to pray for wisdom, to pray for the Spirit of God to soften the heart of your young person, your child or whoever, but also to give you wisdom to know how to deal with this, because it's going to take some humility. Because the instinct a lot of times is to fight back, especially if they're challenging your values, especially if they're challenging your political choices. We're all human, and it's easy to just get into an argument. Let me say this. I would avoid it at all costs. I know that might sound weird coming from me, who seems to talk about things on a regular basis that stirs the hornet's nest, right? You're not supposed to talk about politics or religion. In my mind, those are the two things that matter most. The one, relationship with Jesus Christ, matters more than anything else. But it's also important, these ideas, the way that we live this side of heaven on planet Earth as well. That's what I want to talk about. But I'm conservative, not bitter. And I'm not here. Listen, you can disagree with me. You can share your opinions. And this is why the left can't provide something that's the left's version of this, because they can't allow that. They need control. They need to be able to assert their dominance because they think they're smarter than the rest of us. It takes humility. Genuinely humble yourselves. If you find yourself in this situation and say, even though this is not what I want, what things could I have done? What things could I be doing that's only lighting a match to this volatile situation? And again, it's not to place blame. It's to say, okay, what are some areas that I've got to handle a little bit gently here? And then if and when they do reach out, don't force the conversation. Don't. I've shared stories here of how people have opened up to me over the course of time. And it's never through force. It's never by pushing the issue. It often starts with just listening. If they want to badmouth Trump, if they want to badmouth America, if they want to badmouth Christianity, and if they're sharing their thoughts, if they're working through, listen, if they're just trying to stir you up, I mean, even then I would say, what are you going to do? Just don't respond. Don't react. But let them say it. Don't try to question them. Don't try to interject. It's hard, I know. But some of the greatest inroads I've been able to make, and I don't even want to say that because it makes it about, I'm not making it about me. The greatest inroads I've seen that we've been able to make or that have presented themselves are when we just don't react. And then when you do speak, if you speak with questions. Speak with questions, genuinely, not to try to box them into a corner. Don't try to win a debate. Don't try to persuade them to change their mind and to come back to reality in that first conversation. Just try to understand. Try to let them know that in spite of all of that, there's nothing more important than your love for them. And then it's so far as it is up to you, as the Bible tells us, to live at peace with all people. That's what I seek to do. I want to live at peace with you. We don't have to agree with these things, but we don't have to burn the relationship down as well. There's more tips. I just can't get to them today, my friends. If you're in that situation, I'm terribly sorry, but don't give up hope, my friends. Truth has a way of prevailing, but I've got to go. Thanks for listening. SDG.